Today we talk about dense and sparse dimensions, right? And I told you I will give you some few samples like how they store the data in Essbase. Like I will
Correct.
provide you some scenario why we go to choose dense and sparse dimension, and which dimension should be tagged as dense and which dimensions should be tagged as sparse. So I
Sure.
already told you that dense dimension has a high probability of the data occurring. Okay. So if you take the one transaction, there will be a one dense dimensions. Okay, it has a high probability. So this is a dense data block, how it looks. Okay. So for that sparse and dense combination, that data is stored in that Essbase data block. So each cell has one data.
Each cell has the one data means one record or
It's a one record. Yes.
okay. Okay. Each cell has the one record.
Yeah. Yes. So this cube
Okay.
has many transactions.
So what is there? Some places there is a white.
Or there are empty cells. There is no data
Oh, no data. Empty
because
cells.
it's a
Okay.
block. It's creating the block, right? So for few combination, the data may not be exist. Okay. For example, we are the space create the data block for this.
Hey, can I ask a question there? Can I ask
Yeah.
a question there?
Yes.
For example, if it is a dense,
Okay.
okay, a highly probability of it should have the data. For some
Okay.
reason, there is no data for that.
Okay.
Is that going to fail or is that going to create some?
For the dense dimension, right? For the dense, you are saying for the dense member, there is no data, or can you repeat that question?
So, okay, if the dense one, for example, if that does not, so highly probability should have the data. For some reason, it does not have a data.
Oh, okay. There is a no chance for that. The dense should have the data. Then only it will create the data block. If there is no data, then it won't create the data block. Okay. But see, we are running on a supermarket. Okay. Uh, for that day, consider that is the for that period there should be some sales, right? So there is no chance that there won't be any sales on that day. Okay. If there is no data for the dense member, it won't create any data block. Okay. But the probability is very less.
Probability is very less. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So for example, that Essbase create data block for this combination. Okay.
Okay.
If you look at this, there are few empty cells, right? For few cells doesn't have that data. Okay. So that's why you are seeing that white cells here. There is no data for it.
Right.
Okay. So the Essbase create index for each and every block. Okay. If it is create one block for that data block, it will create the index. Okay. So when you do some data retrieval, it will first fetch that index system to that memory, and it will get that retrieve the data for the specific index. Okay. So using the index system, it will search for that specific data in a space data block. Okay. So if you look at that the structure, right, the space the folder structure, let me show you. So there's the Essbase queue. Okay, I have created one console queue here. Okay, there it doesn't. Okay, so this is a Essbase queue. Okay, so the cube has that one database folder, and here that the file. These are the files related to the database. DB means the database backup file, and this is the database file. Okay, if you look at that file type, right, the database file. Okay. If for some reason if the database is corrupted, we can restore the database from the backup file.
Oh, that is a default one.
Yes. So that Essbase automatically take the backup of the existing database. Okay. We don't need to take anything. Okay. And so this is a database. Here, this is a ESM file. It's kind of kernel file. Okay. And the OTL file means that the Essbase outline file. the outline mean the hierarchy we are creating the space application that it has all the dimensions and members details in the ODL file. Okay.
Okay.
And
Okay.
DCT file is a transaction file. See, for example, we are performing some calculations or we are loading something. So those kind of the admin related task details will be stored in the DCT file, the transaction file.
Okay.
It records all that process in the DCT file. Okay. So whenever you do the data import, it creates an index file for the specific data block. Okay. So this is a page
Okay.
file, the data file. So for that page file, it creates the index file. Okay.
Okay.
So if you have the index system, right, it will increase the performance of the data load and the calculations, everything. Okay. So this is a
Okay.
space folder structure.
Oh,
And this is
okay.
for that currency. If you have enabled that currency database, then it will create another folder called the rate applications. Okay, so the rate application has also the same structure as similar to the main database. So this is a base database, this is a currency database. Okay.
Okay.
So we have
Okay.
the same structure because in the currency database also we have to create the hierarchy for the currency and we go to upload that FX rate, the exchange rate. Okay. So
Okay.
here, so the rates are stored in the page file, in the file format. Okay. So both have a similar structure. Okay.
Okay.
So in other folder, we can. Okay, so this application is belongs to FCCS, the HFM application. Okay, so here the folder structure is different from the actual Essbase application. So if you look at the
Okay.
other folder structure, you can see other aspects like calculator script or data scripts. Okay, here we can see that the dimensions was created in that FCCS applications. Okay. So it's very the folder structure is very based on that applications, the EPM application. So this is for that FCCS application. If it is Essbase, you should be able to see that calculator scripts. I showed you right the list of calculator script created in the Essbase. So those scripts you can see it in that folder.
Okay. Okay.
So this is a dense data block, and okay. So for example, you want to find out the how many data blocks are created in that Essbase system. Okay. Usually we calculate the data block to find out that volume of the disk, or uh, if you want to change some setting, we have to calculate that number of data block. We call it as potential number of data block. Okay. See first how the data block is created. So the Essbase create a data block for the unique combination of sparse members, and for that combination, the data should be exist. At least one data value should be exist for that combination. Okay, and once it's created the data block for the sparse dimension, and it includes that associated dense dimension in the data block. Okay, so the data block mean it's a combination of sparse dimension and also it represents the dense dimensions. Okay, so this is how the data block is calculated. For example,
Okay.
I already told you, right? The product, sales, the region, actual, or these are the sparse dimension. Okay, so the data block will be created for the sparse combination, and the period and year is at a dense dimension. Okay, so
Okay.
first it
Okay.
creates the data block for the existing data, and also it includes the dense dimensions. Okay. If there is no data for the sparse dimension, it won't create any data block. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So this is how the data block is created. And if we want to calculate the data block, we have to consider only the stored member. Yesterday we discussed about the data storage property, right? It has the store member, dynamic cal can store, and shared member,
Right.
never share. And the another one is I missed one of that properties, that is label one. Okay, label only means it won't store any data, but it can be used for navigating that member. Okay, I will explain it later. Okay, so if you want to create that data block, we have to consider only stored member and that and dynamic and store member.
But dynamic is also it's going to or dynamic and store. Okay.
Oh yeah, yes. Okay. In we don't see any data in a dynamic and shared member, and also that never share label one. So that's why we don't include that members or in data block calculation. Okay, so we consider only both the store member and the dynamic and the store member. So the potential number of data blocks calculated based on the sparse members. Okay, it's multiply all the sparse member. Okay, if you multiply all the sparse member, it will calculate the potential number of data blocks. That means the data exists for this combination. Okay, so this is how we create the how we calculate that number of data blocks. So still there are a lot of calculations. We can calculate the density of the data block. Okay, and we calculate. Okay, maybe we can see this part later. Okay. For example, Essbase has some cache settings. Okay, to increase the performance of the Essbase calculation or data load, we have to increase the cache setting. We have the database load, data load cache setting, calculation cache setting. There are a lot of things. Okay, so based on the data block size, we will be increasing that cache settings. Okay, so for that we would need to calculate that data block. Okay. It is not necessary, but if you are working as an administrator, okay, then you should know about these concepts.
Okay.
Okay, so already I discussed about that index. Okay, the index entry is created for each and every data block. It represents a combination of sparse and standard dimension. Okay, sparse standard dimension. And the data block won't created for attribute dimension. It only created for the sparse and dense dimensions. Okay.
Can you repeat that?
We have that two kind of dimensions, right? One is standard and another one is attribute dimensions.
Correct.
Okay. Correct. So the data block won't be created for the attribute dimensions. It creates the block only for the standard dimensions.
Okay, got that.
Okay. The attribute dimension won't store any data. That's used for only attaching the member. It's used for classifying the term member. Okay.
So attribute is a kind of shared member, is it?
It's not a shared member. It's kind of member only. Okay. But it's only used to represent one of the data, one of the member in that sparse dimension. Maybe I can show you some examples. Okay. I have prepared one PPT for that. I will show you.
Okay, sure.
So there are a few scenarios. Yesterday you asked me, right, why you cannot tag few members as dense, few members as a sparse. Okay, so there are few scenarios. Okay, this first two things I already explained to you. Like if you make all the members as a sparse dimensions, it will create many data blocks and it impacts the performance of that cube. Okay.
Okay.
For example, there are many dimensions in the space. Okay. For example, we have account, year, period, entity, customer, product. Okay, we got 5 members. Okay, so for account, year, and period, we'll be having some data for every day. There will be some transaction, or every month there will be transaction for this dimensions. Okay, so these dimensions marked with dense.
Okay.
Okay, and the data may not be exist for the few or entities, or that the customer may not exist for the specific transaction. Okay, there may not be any sales for the specific product. Okay, so these dimensions identify as the sparse dimensions because we have the less
Okay.
probability of data.
Mhm.
And also in Essbase, we go that automatic configuration. If we have enabled the automatic configuration, it automatically find that the dense and sparse member, and it makes that in the back end, it will set that each and every dimension type. That code is belongs to dense, the iris belongs to dense. Like that, it automatically set that dimension type. Okay, but mostly we don't
Oh,
enable the automatic configuration, but we manually set that dimension type.
okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so for a okay, so this is how we this is how we set up the dimension type. Okay, for example, if I make all that dimension as spots, so this is
Okay.
scenario one. Okay, so if we make all the dimensions as dense, the space and like if we already discussed that if you mark all that dimensions as dense, it will that space thinks that all the members has some data. Okay, so it will create that only one data block for all the combinations. And in that bigger data block, there will be many empty cells. Okay, for example, I have marked all that members dimension as dense, and it will create only one data block for these combinations. Okay, and the data maybe exists for the
Okay.
few point of view, and there may not be data for the other product or members. Okay, so there will be lots of empty cells, but it will create only one data block. Okay, so imagine you are doing some calculations or you are performing some data retrieval. Okay, so if you perform this some calculation, the SPSS has to bring the whole data block to the RAM. Remember, it has to bring the only one data block to the memory. Okay, but we have only the 4 GB of RAM, but the database size will
Okay.
be something around 16 GB or 20 GB. Okay, so
Okay.
if you try to perform the calculation, or it will corrupt the server or the space application. It impacts that space application's performance.
Mhm.
Okay, it's not
Okay.
possible, right, to bring that the only one bigger data block to that memory, the 4 GB memory. That's not possible. Okay,
Right.
and the
Right.
second scenario, if we mark all the dimension as spots, okay, there is no
Okay.
dense dimension, but we have only one spots dimension. So Essbase will
Mm.
create a data block for each and every combination. That means for this combination, it has the data. Okay, so it will create one block, and for this combination, it will create one block, and this combination, it will create a data block. For each and every point of view, it will create the data block. Okay, so that Essbase will create thousands of data blocks. That means there will be many data blocks here in the space, and also it create a huge volume of that index, because for every data block it has to create one index, right? So there will be large
Yeah.
number
Will
of
be.
index.
Right.
Okay, when you
Right.
try to retrieve the data for a specific point of view, it has to go to the each and every index and find out the data block. Okay, so it again it's going to impact the
Mm.
performance of the calculation and the data retrieval. Okay, so we don't tag that we don't set up this scenario as well. Both scenario doesn't don't work in the space system. Okay, so we need to mix both dimension type. We go to use both dimension type to set up that dimension. We go to use dense dimension or that and also we go to use a sparse dimension based on the scenario. Okay, so this is the first scenario. If you mark all the dimension as sparse, it will create many data block. Okay, for each and every
Different data block.
data, it will create
Okay.
multiple data blocks, and it has a large complex index. and it requires a large memory and it impacts that performance. Okay, and the next one is if you create all the dimensions as the dense dimension, it will create only one huge block. Okay, and also it has only one index entry. Okay, so Essbase cannot load the entire block into the memory. Okay, that's not possible. Okay, so next one, we identified few members as sparse and we identified few dimensions as dense dimensions. Okay, so this is a correct setting. Okay, so if the data is exists, it will create a block. Otherwise, it won't create any block. Okay, so this is an index system for that dense and sparse setting. Okay, this looks very feasible and optimal. Okay, and here we go some problem. Okay, so where while we use and dense and sparse dimension, we need to know which dimension should be marked as dense and which one should be marked as sparse. For example, for account in year and period, we will be having a transaction. For every month, there will be a transaction. So this dimension is marked as dense. But if you mark this account member as sparse and this entity customer product member as dense dimensions, again it's going to create a problem because for that for each and every account there will be some transaction. Okay, so for this dimension it will create many data blocks. Okay, so again it's going to impact the performance of the cube. Okay, and also for this here we marked as dense dimension, but the data may not be exist for few point of view. Okay, then this combination will create many empty data block. Okay, so to avoid that, we go to mark that the correct dimension type as dense, and that the other members so it has less probability. Those dimensions should be tagged as sparse dimensions. So so in this scenario, we have explained about that problem. See, if you look at um, here, the sparse members on the time and account. If you mark that account year period as that the sparse dimension, it creates many empty blocks. If you consider empty cells, see here there are many data block, right? Each data block has many empty cells. Okay, the green one is for the data cell, and the other one is for the empty cells. Okay, and if you tag that time and account as a dense dimension, if there is no data, it won't create any data block. So this scenario looks very optimal. So this is how we select the dense and sparse dimensions. So always if there is a high probability of data, so those dimensions should be tagged as dense. If there is very less probability of the data, then it should be marked as sparse. So this is a correct setting for Essbase application. So next we discuss about Essbase database design, how we have to design the database. Okay, so we go to usually we follow this process that design cycle to design the database. Okay. First we analyze the business needs, like mostly we need to know about what are the dimensions there. Okay, and mostly they will be using account, time, period, business, and there will be some uh, attribute dimensions. Okay, so we need to get that requirement from the business. Okay. So once we got that the metadata details, we'll be designing the outline. So once we got that member detail, we build the outline, and after that we will be doing that data load. Okay, using that rule file, we will be loading the data, and we follow the same procedure, and we aggregate the data and generate the report. So this is a database design cycle. And these are the dimensions. So we are using it in the Essbase applications. So these are the major dimensions. Okay, it's based on the business requirement, but usually it includes these dimensions. We will be having that time and periods. There should be accounting dimension. Scenario mean that the data, uh, the data type, maybe the actual or budget data or forecast data. Okay, and this is product, and this is distribution channels. This is geographical region, geographical and region, and business unit. So mostly these dimensions are used in the Essbase applications. Okay, so we already discussed about dense and sparse dimensions. Okay, and we know about the standard and attribute dimensions, and we need to know about the dimension combination. Okay, when you do the data retrieval, you want to provide some the point of view, right? Okay. See, for example, here we have provided the dimension combination to retrieve the data. So we need to know which combination we go to use in the data retrieval. Okay.
Okay.
And if there is any repetition, we go to optimize that. We go to remove that repeated members. And interdimensional irrelevance means there may be some irrelevance dimension. Okay. So that one we have to find it out. So these are not a problem, but we can optimize that database using this step. Okay. And the reason to split the database. This is talks about the partisans. Why we need to have the partisans. Okay. See, okay. And that's it. Okay. So first we talk about that attribute dimension. Okay. Um. See, for example, you do some retrieval. Okay. Okay. So product one mean or there will be many items under that product. Okay. For example, if it is shoe or t-shirt, there will be many colors. Okay. So users is doing the retrieval, generating the report through the smart view. Okay. So they got the details they got the data for the product one. Okay. Again, they want to drill down to the product one. I want that get the product which is the color of the product one is green or something. So here I can add one more dimensions, green color. Okay. So it will provide the data only for that product which has the green color. Okay, but it is not a base dimension, but is that the dimension is this attribute dimension is used to classify the base dimension. Okay, it's used only used for the reporting and other calculation. It doesn't store any data. Okay, but if you create one base dimension for this attribute dimension, again it's going to occupy the memory and it's going to impact the performance. To avoid that, just we have created one attribute dimension. Okay, because we know that the requirement just is like it's going to classify one of the product. Then why you want to create one extra base dimension? Okay, so that's why we create this member as attribute dimension. So for this example, we go to one product. Okay, and under the 100 we go 110, 120, 130. Okay, and these base member associated with the attribute dimension, caffeinated, ounces, package type. Okay, so these are we go three attribute dimension, and this attribute dimension is associated with the member 110. Okay, so the color of this 110 is true, and it has the 12 ounces, and the package type is can. Okay, so 130 is the 130 has a okay, it's a Boolean attribute. Okay, so caffeinated means it's false. It marked as false, and it has a 16 ounces. The package type is bottle. Okay, so this is how we associate the base member with the attribute dimensions. So the parent member should be associated with the parent member of the attribute. Here we made the association. It should be associated with caffeinated ounces and package type. Okay.
Okay.
So this is another example. So there are four types of attribute dimension. One is Boolean. The Boolean has true or false value. Numeric means it has only numbers. Okay, numeric value. And text, it may be any characters. Okay. And date means it should have some date value. Okay. So these are the types of attribute dimension. And there are
Okay.
few rules for the attribute dimension. It should be only associated with the sparse dimension. You cannot associate with dense dimension. Like here that Year is the dense dimension. Year measures are the dense dimensions. So this attribute you cannot associate with this dense dimensions. Okay, and by
Okay.
default that
Okay.
attribute dimension are sparse dimensions. Okay,
Okay.
so you can tag only the sparse dimension as an attribute dimension, and these members should be created in the last of the outline. Okay, if you look at the attribute dimension, the it should be created in the last. The order should be in the last. And these are the types of attribute dimension: text, numeric, Boolean, date. Okay. And if you remove the attribute dimension from that outline, it will remove that all the association. Okay. You will lose all the association. Okay. And one base member can have multiple attributes. Okay. For one standard dimension, we can associate multiple attributes. But you can assign only one member from that attribute member. Okay. For example, for 110, we go that 110 associated with only the true value. We cannot have the two values from the same attribute dimension. And also, yesterday we talked about a shared member, right? Also, we cannot use attribute dimension attribute members for the shared member. Okay, it can be associated only with the base member. Base member means the standard dimension. And one more thing, we can associate only the level 0 members. Okay, we cannot create any hierarchy and okay. Uh, For example, here we have the outside attribute. Okay, here we can create another hierarchy. Okay, above 30, below 30, like that we can create hierarchy, and we can make the association. But we can associate only the level 0 members of the attribute dimension. Okay, we cannot assign any parent member to that base member. You understand, right? For example, for the population attribute, we have created another hierarchy called small. Under small, we have two members. Okay, so we can assign that attribute member 3 million and 6 million to the base member. We cannot assign the small member to that base member. Okay,
Okay. Got it.
so by default, the attribute type is type. And also we have that few calculations, and we have one more items in that airspace outline. We call it as UDA. Okay, UDAs also act like attribute dimensions. Okay, but we don't create it in the outline. We know the attribute is created as one member, right? So
Mhm.
if you look at this outline, the attributes are created in the outline. Okay, we have created one attribute dimension and we make the associate. Okay, but we don't create any UDA member in the outline, but just we make the association. Okay, there is a difference between UDAs and attributes member. If it is UDA, you can assign that member to either a sparse member or the dimension member. Okay, but if it is attribute, you can assign it only to the sparse member. Okay, so that's the difference between UDAs and attributes. Still, there are lots of difference between UDAs and attributes, but we can see that later. Okay, that's not important. Okay, UDAs mean user-defined attribute. We use some words or phrases within the calculated scripts, or maybe we can use it in that member formula. Okay, and also it will be used in the reports. Like in Smart View, we use that attribute dimension, right? Like that, we can use some UDAs. We can create some our own UDA and use that member in the reporting. Okay.
Okay.
So member formulas means if you look at this screenshot, right, we can see that the UDA is associated with the base member. For example, Jan 2009, the history UDA is associated with this member. Okay, just we can manually type that word and associate with that the specific member. Okay, we don't have any
Mhm.
hierarchy or that attribute members for the UDA. Just we can right click on the member Okay, so there will be an option to assign that UDA. So that here we talk about repetition in the outline. If you look at that hierarchy, right, few members are
Mhm.
repeated in the hierarchy. So we have to find it out and we have to optimize that outline design. Okay. So under the accounts, we have budget, profit, margin. Okay. And in the next hierarchy also, we have that profit and margin. Okay. So just we have identify that repeated member and we have optimized that outline design. Okay. We have created one common scenario member. So under that we have given a budget and actual, and under the profit we have included margin, sales and cost. Because the another thing, the space won't allow that duplicate members. We cannot have two members in the same outline. Okay, but in the latest version there is the option to create duplicate members, but we have to enable while creating that space application. Okay. So once you enable that setting, you cannot revert it. Okay. So this is here we talk about interdimensional requirements. Okay. So yes, here that the report has the details about employees. Okay. Um, we got few employees and we got few members like measures revenue, variable cost, COGS. Okay. So these are members not related to the employees. Okay, only the salary member is related to that employee. So here, so the salary is that the other members are that irrelevant members. Already we talked about dimension and member properties. Right? So we have that dimension type and attribute association. This one we have covered. Data storage properties already we have covered, like we have that stored shared member, never share dynamic calc. So these are the data storage properties. And the consolidation
Mhm.
operator, we have that addition, subtraction, division. So those mathematical operators are consolidation operators. And also we can have some formulas in the outline. So these are the dimension type. Dimension, apart from the sparse and the dense dimension, we have to assign the dimension types. It may be that time dimension, accounts, or the attribute, uh, and we have the country, currency, position. Mostly we don't use country and currency position. Okay, in Essbase we don't use these dimensions, and we are using time, accounts, and attribute dimension. For example, the here the year is a time dimension. Okay, and measure is a account dimension, and here we have created few attribute dimension and it's tagged as attribute. Okay, and
Okay.
for the time dimension we have some dynamic time series members. Okay, we have the YTD, STD, QTD values. Okay,
Right.
so what does mean by YTD? We have YTD, HD,
Year to date, yes. And
yeah, you
yeah,
know about, right, YTD, day to day. Okay,
yeah,
so it has the
yeah.
year-to-date values. So it provides that predefined dynamic time series functionality for the time members. Okay, and okay, let's talk about the label only. Okay, here the member is tagged as label only. We have few children like profit, inventory, and ratios. Okay, and if you look at that measure dimension, there is no consolidation operator. Okay, if you look at other members, there will be some plus or minus something, or it will mark as a store member. So do while while performing the calculation, it will aggregate the data. But if you look at this measure, it's marked as label only. Okay, that means the data won't be aggregate to the measures dimensions. Okay, it will show the data, it display the data from the first member of the measure dimension. The first member is the profit. So whatever we have it in we have it in the data, we have it in the profit. So that data will be displayed in the measure dimension. Okay. So label only used to navigate the members. It doesn't represent any data, the consolidated data. Okay. So that's why we use the label only. If for the inventory, I don't want to consolidate the data. I don't want to there may not be any addition or subtraction in the inventory account. Okay, so it provides only that uh, it provides that only the display only the data would based on that children. There will be, so we use a time balance property. So based on the time balance property, display the data. So these are the storage properties. We go the label only. Label has no data associated with it. It can display value. It's used to used for the navigation and reporting. And the next one, these are the operators: plus, minus, multiplication, division, percentage, and never consolidate. Okay. So if you look at the hierarchy, here, okay, here we go that margin. So under margin we go the sales and COGS. Okay, so Essbase console the data. Uh, it follows that top down order. Essbase calculate the data of the branch in the top down order. For example, here we go the sales and COGS. Okay, first it will take the sales data and it will divide the data with the COGS. Okay, it comes from the top to down order. For example, but in our mathematics, it will be the multiplication has more precedence over the plus or minus, right? Okay, but in
Right.
Essbase, it will
Right.
perform from the top to down. Okay.
Okay.
It's not about the
Okay.
precedent, it's based on the order of the members. And here we talk about time balance properties. We call it as TP first and TP lost. For example, for the inventory for January month, we got some data 100, and for February we got some data 50. For March we got some data. So if we mark that by default, that account members are marked as label only, and also we can use TP first, TP lost, and TP average. So these are the few properties, that data storage properties that can be tagged to that label only member. For example, if I mark that inventory as TP first, okay, so it will take the data from the first member of that inventory parent. Here the data is 100, so during the data retrieval, it will display the data 100. Okay, because for the inventory, it's keeping the stock. Okay, it won't aggregate the data. For example, the January month we got that 100 items, and the next month we got only the 50 items. Okay, and end of the March we got only 200 items because few items added, few items should be added to that March month, so it displayed 200 or something. Okay, because if you aggregate the data, it won't make any sense. Okay, that's why we use a TB fast, TB loss. If you tag that member as a TB fast, it will give that data of the first member. If you mark that inventory as TB lost, it will display the data from the lost member 200. Okay, and if you mark the dimension type as TP average, it will provide the average of this 3 month, that's 350. Okay, so these properties we call it as time balance properties. We got time balance loss, time balance first. Okay, in the later version there are a few more functionalities added. I guess we can calculate some count. There are and also we got the flow fill. So there are a few more functionality added to the time balance properties.
Okay.
So here we got a few examples. TB first mean it will display the first member of the quarter one, that is 20. Okay, if it is TB loss, it will provide the value of the last month, the last member, that's 30. Okay, and another one we have that variance reporting. If you look at this outline, right, the opening inventory is marked as TB first. Okay, and the ending inventory is marked as TP loss. And also we have that property is called variance reporting. For example, if you tag the member as expense member, for example, the total expenses are expense member, okay, and we use that variance function to calculate that budget minus actual data. Expense mean we allocate some budget for that specific account, okay, and end of the year we calculate the actual data. So what will be the expense for I go spent I go allocated $100 for the specific account, and it provided sales of $110. So the variance is minus 10 for the expense account. Okay, so this is how we calculate the variance reporting. And if you don't mark that member as a expense property, then that space calculated as actual minus budget. I go spend $100 and it gives that the sales amount of $110. So the variance result will be in that positive. Okay, so this is how we calculate the variance reporting. So if you look at the outline, right, that opening inventory is marked as expense reporting, total expense is marked as expense reporting, and the next one we go another member property is called two pass calculations. Okay, for example, here I do that aggregation. I have loaded the data for Jan, February, and March and perform the calculation aggregation. Okay. So for the quarter one, I get the 300. You got it right. We have that profit of 300 for the quarter one, and we know that aggregate data for the quarter one is 3000. Okay. So we calculate the profit out percentage. If you look at the outline, we already have that profit. Because some the member formula profit percentage sales. Okay, so based on the calculation, it automatically calculate that profit percentage. So for that January month, it gives a 10%. Okay? And February and March, it's 30%. So during the aggregation, it gives a 30%. For the quarter one, we get that 30% of profit. But this is not correct, because if you calculate 3000 divided by 300 divided by 3000, it give you only the 10,000. It should be 10%, right? But it gives 30%. So the calculation is wrong. To correct that, we use the two-part calculation. Okay. First, during that calculation or the aggregation, it aggregate all the data to the profit percentage. So we get this value. Okay. Again, that if you tag that member as a two-part calculation, it performed two calculations. Okay. In the first pass, it will aggregate the data for the profit percentage. In the next pass, it will aggregate the data for the quarter one. So in the second pass, we will get the correct data.
Okay.
Okay, just it recalculate that the data, recalculate that data for the parent member. Okay, now we get the correct data for the quarter one. So that's why we use that two-pass calculation. For example, for the margin percentage, we use the two-pass calculations. Okay, mostly we'll be using the two-pass calculation for the dynamic calc member, or if there is any member formula, we will be using the two-pass calculations. Okay, member formula means so we got one member margin percentage. Okay, so if you want to calculate the margin, it will be based on that margin and the sales. Okay, so here in Essbase we have some uh, formula properties. There we can create our own formula. Okay, for example, here if you want to calculate the margin, it will be based on the sales on the COG. Okay, so for that member, we can create some formulas. Yeah.
Okay.
So this one we already discussed about the hierarchy. Okay, we use
Right.
generation and levels. Okay, this is another example for the member formula. If you look at the profit percentage, we got the formula. The profit is calculated based on the profit and sales. Okay. So this is how we create that member formula. In the outline, we go the properties, right? Or if you right click on the member, we can get the properties of that member. So in the properties, we can create a formula. Okay. So these members tax us to pass. Okay. and this is at 4 dimensions, dimensions. Yeah, yeah, that's it. Scaling.